I'd like to welcome you to Onclusive's panel discussion, Owned Media and the Growth PR Playbook. Today, we are very fortunate to have an esteemed panel. We have Andy Cunningham from the Cunningham Collective, a boutique branding and communications agency. Josh Grau, who is the Chief Brand Officer at Yext, a large technology company of about 1,000 people. And Michelle Herman, VP of Corporate Marketing and Brand at Sisense, a late-stage startup. And I'm Dan Beltramo, CEO of Onclusive. I will be hosting and moderating the sessions. I'll ask that Andy, Josh, and Michelle provide a brief overview of their companies when they come up to talk about their best practices. So today, what are we going to cover? We're going to cover what is growth PR. We're going to quickly outline 5 owned media strategies that are proven to work. We're going to talk a little bit about some measurement frameworks. After all, that's the business that we're in. And then we're going to get to the heart of the webinar today, which is our panelists' best practices and examples. They're fantastic examples, very current, and also one about a turnaround of an iconic brand. And then we'll get into a discussion and Q&A at the end. So we have a jam-packed agenda here. And I'll kick it off. Growth PR, what is it? Well, at Onclusive, it's the way that we think about modern PR. It all starts with crafting a narrative. And this isn't just picking some old narrative that you want to talk about or your CEO wants to talk about. This is using data to identify the topics that your audience cares about, that resonates with your audience, and that drive the kind of behaviors and actions that you need your communications to deliver for your company. The next step is to get your story told on the right channels. Our audience here is comprised of PR professionals that cover many channels. Today, we're going to be focusing on the owned media channel, where we think it all starts, the nucleus of your communications program. Once you have that story out there, it's important to amplify your most valuable content. And in order to do that, you need to identify what is your most valuable content, and then you need to get it out into a variety of channels. There's so much media fragmentation right now that it's not a matter of just putting your story out there. You need to help it be found by the audience that you want to receive it. And then you measure the true impact, and you create the virtuous loop of identifying the content that works, improving upon the narrative, putting it in the right channels, and amplifying it in a continuous loop. And you're going to see very clearly how this program works in some of the examples coming up. So 5 winning owned media strategies. We put out a piece of owned content recently that talked about this, but these are 5 of the key things that after interviewing many of our customers, we found to be among the best practices. One is provide something of value. This isn't something of value that you think up in your head. You have to put yourself in the mind of your customer or consumer and think about what they find valuable. And then you need to answer that question. And that's what we mean by providing something valuable with your owned media. Then you need to optimize for discovery. This is a two-part thing. One, you need to have the data and understanding of what people are looking for so you can get in front of their content needs and content aspirations. And then when you design that content, you need to design it with the keywords, phrases, memes that help enable it for discovery. And then thirdly, you want to make sure that even on your site, it's placed so that people can find it easily. Then enlisting internal experts. We call this insourcing. Companies have different approaches on it, but for owned content, the best people are often, not always, but often people on your team, whether they're experts or subject matter experts, maybe they're client service people. The people on your team are going to understand the needs and value that your products provide the best, and they're going to be able to put it in the language of your customers. So look internally. Then we talked a little bit about amplifying your message, but this can be amplifying it on social media through your corporate channels. It can be through employee advocacy, where you have your employees amplify the message. And then it can also be through paid social, where you make sure that you get your message in front of the exact audience that you want. And again, in order to do all of this, you want to have a good measurement and optimization capabilities. I'm going to walk you through a little bit on measurement and optimization, and then we'll get straight to the best practices from our panelists. So one of the things that you definitely want to do with your own media is understand your baseline. Where are you starting? And this is the blog readership for Inclusive here. In our own platform, we know where we are on an average basis. And then we focus on those spikes and make sure we understand them. Another thing to know about your own media is what is driving social media engagement. Not only which channel is driving the engagement, but which stories are driving that engagement. And the way to figure that out is to take all of your stories, easily done in our application, and rank them based on social amplification. Then you can quickly see which stories are being amplified socially. And social amplification is obviously a good proxy for engagement, and should influence which topics you continue to pound in your owned media strategy. Then there's a little bit more subtle than the baseline of your own blog is what's happening at traffic on your site. And what we like to do is correlate this data with our blog readership and see which articles on our blog are driving people to spend more time on the site. It's one thing to have somebody come in and read a story that you've printed. It's an entirely next level owned media marketing or owned media content when it's good enough that it creates the impetus to look around on your site and learn more. Then the ultimate test of any content is, does it drive conversions? Now, not all organizations have conversion data on their site, but conversion data doesn't necessarily mean that you're selling something on your site. It could be that you just want to have people download a white paper, request a quote, contact you in some way. So whatever your conversions are, you need to know which specific articles are driving those conversions, and that we regularly do on our website. And one of the things that we often notice is that some of the articles that are better at driving conversions are not necessarily those that are most socially amplified or most read. So you need to have multiple levels of understanding of each piece of content you put out there. So with that, that kind of covers how to measure your content. And what I'd like to do now is turn the stage over to Michelle from Sisense. And Michelle, maybe you could tell us a tiny bit about Sisense up front, and then the stage is yours. And you're on mute right now. You need to unmute yourself.
I am unmuted. Thank you very much. Okay, so Sisense is a late stage private company. We are in the business of selling business analytics, and essentially companies buy us who want to crunch complex data, and they're looking to deliver insights that will help them better manage their business. That's in short, and it's actually important to understand that because it's going to play into the story that I'm going to tell and what you see on this slide here. My philosophy about content marketing generally has evolved in the same way sort of that my professional journey has. I started in PR, very traditional earned media, evolved into corporate marketing because I didn't want to just be known as a traditional PR person. I wanted to get closer to the business, and I moved from the agency side into in-house. And I became very interested in brand along the way and how that affiliation with an experience and the personalization of engagement can really drive growth. And the power of content marketing has only really reinforced my passion for brand and sort of vice versa. And I want to tell you why. So when I joined Sisense about a year ago, the experience of interviewing didn't actually match the marketing that I saw while I was interviewing. So once I joined the company, essentially, I had this perception of this company based on all the interviews, the people I'd met. I joined inside and I looked at everything on the outside and thought, it feels like there's a disconnect here. And so we conducted some informal survey, and got the information back and realized, no, yeah, okay, I was right. No, we needed to sort of adjust the brand and figured out what our brand was. And we were a creator, which is an innovator, and Sage, which means we're a brand that really is very helpful and people turn to us because they're looking for knowledge. Fantastic. Most people would kill for that kind of brand. That's an archetype that's just amazing. So once we applied that learning, we were able to apply that also to the content program and really build a highly performant content program that emerged. And it was terrific. So fast forward to, I guess, early this year, and along comes COVID-19. And like everyone else, began a journey like no other. And so all of a sudden, COVID-19 hits, and we decide to build a COVID-19 task force within the company. 2 parts. Our customer success team immediately went to bear hug our customers to say, how can we help? Offering free software, offering our time and attention. The beauty of working for an analytics company and having software that can actually help companies better manage their business, anticipate what's going to happen, help them be more agile is a brilliant and wonderful thing. So we were able to actually really help companies maneuver and navigate and continue to do that. And then on the marketing side, we were told, okay, hey, let's think about what people are consuming right now, and people are consuming everything to do with COVID-19. So let's pivot to COVID-19. And we did that full bore across our programs, including content. And if you run a data-driven content program, which we do, we saw very quickly that the performance dropped. I mean, it really did tank. And we stopped very quickly and realized, wait a second. We switched the program to go full bore on COVID-19, and we lost sight of why people really come to us. And why people come to us is for helpful content. They come to us to solve their problems. So, Dan, you're moving a little too fast. I'm not quite there yet, but we're just about there. So really, when we thought to how are we going to really fix this, we went back to the brand, the core values of what really matters to us, what matters to the people who are searching for us. So we sell to product teams, we sell to data teams, and they're searching for useful content. They're searching for technical content. They're searching for things that they really care about. So now, Dan, next slide. So this is what our program evolved to. This is the kind of things that people really cared about. Tools of the trade, navigating change and crisis, healthy data. We evolved the program back to kind of a center balanced approach that really was the types of content that still intersected with COVID-19, but was really an intersection of what people were searching for, in addition to what the reality was in the market. And that allowed us to have a highly performing content program and get us back on track quickly. So there's a lot of learning there. We over-rotated, we lost sight of what was important to our audience just very quickly. And my big aha there was really stay true to your brand and your brand archetype when you're running your content program. And I don't think I necessarily would be thinking about that if it wasn't for COVID-19. So I thought that would be an important thing to share. Then taking that a step further, we still have a marketing program to run. And I think we've all learned and we've all paid attention to the research that in times of crisis, don't overmarket, right? It's about solving problems and helping customers and helping people who are looking for things, not just being true to your brand. So we dug, into data, and we decided, if you would go to the next slide, please, Dan, that we would conduct a survey. And so our business is business intelligence and analytics. And we conducted a survey on the state of this industry with a special COVID edition, because this is still a very relevant topic. And we conducted this survey across North America, and we took a very integrated approach. And I think many people do this, and it's the right way to go. And so I just wanted to show you that, it's never the wrong approach to dig into data. We took a very holistic surround sound approach where we looked at social media and paid advertising, developed an interactive dashboard. Dashboarding is a huge part of business intelligence, and we're able to drive a lot of fantastic results. We're a campaign-driven marketing company, and a lot of fantastic content has come out of this. We are still in the middle of this campaign, actually. And so I just wanted to show you a sampling of this and where we are today. So I guess my big aha is stay true to your brand archetype. Don't forget that data-driven content will always ring true. And yeah, I think those are my key lessons.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I think a couple of the key things that really stood out there to me are one, your humility on how you dealt with COVID. You know, it's not easy to get it right the first time, and sticking with it to get the right tone and tenor is important. So that's awesome. And then I would just like to highlight, I've had a lot of positive experience as well in owned media with reports like this. When you can do a report that is of substantive value to your audience, it tends to have very long legs and can be used in a variety of ways, which you're showing here. So I always find that to be a very good long-term content marketing play. All right, with that, I'll turn it to Josh. I'm sorry for advancing the slides a little bit choppy. I take my cursor off the screen. It sometimes doesn't advance the slides as planned. But Josh, you're up, and we're happy to have you.
Great. Sound okay? Just making sure we haven't had a hostile takeover by the Wi-Fi overlords. So hi, everyone who's attending today. Thank you. My name is Josh Grau, and I am with Yext. We are a publicly traded software company known as the next big thing in search. Our category is the search experience cloud. And so effectively, we help manage all of the business's information across the internet, but starting with your own website. We have a product called Yext Answers, which is really meant to help your website do the heavy lifting. So if you've ever gone to a business's website as a consumer and searched for something, typed in a question, often you'll get a unsavory response. Either it sends you on a really terrible rabbit hole, or you'll get no answer or a random answer. And so we work to solve that. My kind of concept about how I think about content and our team is delivering value before the value. Now, all of us who have businesses, our real value is the product or services that we offer. That should be the thing that gives you a unique or unfair advantage in the marketplace. But it's sometimes quite hard to get people to buy what you're selling. So you want to think of ways in which you can provide value before they actually sign on the dotted line. COVID, and I'll talk about this in a few slides, but was an opportunity for us to really think about this concept. And what we did was, first of all, started at the product level. What kind of value can we offer people when everybody instantly was in an austerity mode and people were making much harder and stricter decisions about where they were going to spend money or deploy resources? So we offered our product Answers for free. In fact, it's a free offer that will be ongoing. So if you're interested, you can check out yext.com or our what we call our challenge to see how your website performs at nowronganswers.com. But the idea there was to give value in a free trial of the product for 90 days to help businesses with their continuity during this really challenging time. But even though we were offering something that was a differentiated product for free, it still takes people a while to understand who you are, why you matter, and why they should sort of go into this relationship with you. And that's where content becomes a really important driver. So we look at how we can fill parts of the funnel with great moments of value that are derived from our content that, again, plays into the unique advantage that we have. And that definitely falls into a lot of different areas. Our thought leadership and the amazing people that we have inside the company, friends of our company that we can tap to help, and then, of course, amazing reams of data that we sit on that are incredibly valuable in any time, but in particular during this global pandemic. So if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you about a story that I think illuminates that, how we sort of took an opportunity and then really built an entire integrated content strategy around it. So we are not in the business of working with government agencies. It's just nothing that we had ever thought about. We hadn't targeted them. If anyone's worked with a government agency, they often move quite slow. Our focus has been really kind of the traditional business world across all categories. But we had a unique relationship inside the company with the state of New Jersey. And at the same time that we were offering our product Answers for free to any business that needed help managing that huge influx of web traffic that was happening. So imagine you know, when everything started breaking in terms of the real panic, people were turning to different businesses to ask questions. You know, what are your hours of operation? Do you deliver? What are your safety policies? Healthcare websites getting absolutely trounced with questions. Airlines, what are your cancellation policies? How can I rebook? So we immediately were able to help businesses manage that and allow their websites to take an incredible tax off of the customer service channel, which was already impaired by furloughs and just incredibly long waiting times. Well, so much misinformation and in some cases disinformation was circulating about COVID-19. It became instantly a politicized thing, unfortunately. And so the state of New Jersey really wanted to get a hold of it and become the single source of truth for their residents. And they reached out to us through this relationship to see if we could help them build a special website. And so they created a COVID-19 hub that was powered by our product, Yext Answers. You can see in the image here, it's a search bar. We call it the answers bar. And the idea was you could type in a question, and on the back end, we had powered a knowledge graph so that your question resulted in a very in-depth contextual answer. You didn't have to go on an endless hunt to try to get the information that you wanted, and it was coming from the official sources. And so that was a great opportunity for us to work with a government agency, something we hadn't done before, to do something really unique. But there was a great content opportunity that we decided to work with and start to build on top of it. So this is an example of our blog post that we put up. We would do that for any big initiative that we wanted to do. So really taking advantage of our own channels. If you go to the next slide, we are obviously very active on social media, as most companies are. And so we wanted to make sure that we were hitting our audience across all platforms. So really thinking about how we wanted to relay the message in an Instagram or more visual context to a more business-oriented audience on LinkedIn. And then of course, just being part of the conversation on Twitter. So we covered all of those bases, as most of us do when we've got something big to say. But we also wanted to think about, well, what are the future extensions? So we've gotten this off the ground. We've made this really nice announcement. There's a lot of noise in the media right now, but from an earned perspective, does anyone want to talk to us? Does this pique anyone's interest? Because it's an interesting fusion of the public and the private sector to do good and bring good to the world. And so we were fortunate, if you go to the next slide, that we did get some response. Then TechCrunch decided that they thought the story was interesting, and they did an exclusive on it. We had a great moment to talk with them. They talked with people from the state of New Jersey, and that actually helped us open the door to more opportunities where we didn't have that special relationship. So we ended up doing something for the town of South Bend, Indiana, which has obviously become famous because of Mayor Pete. But they were looking to have a similar solution, but more around jobs. And so we were able to build a jobs hub for them that connected people who had been unfortunately laid off with the businesses that were looking for essential workers. So a little bit of a different spin on the effects of COVID, but the same type of answers powered experience. And then we were very fortunate to get the attention of the State Department and then the World Health Organization. And so this one effort and us doing our due diligence with our own channels and then getting a little bit of earned actually opened up the floodgates. But because New Jersey had been such a great partner, we wanted to really continue to tell the story and sort of see how the value that we offered them was materializing over time. So if you go to the next slide, we've worked with them to develop a case study. So they are very proud of this work. They are wanting themselves to shop it to Harvard Business School, you know, to show how they were a first responder and how they really looked to the private sector to deliver real value and actually save lives by way of channeling that important information. So we've developed a comprehensive case study, and we're going to continue to break that apart and use some of that data to tell more stories through our own channels. And we've also simultaneously been developing some original content, some new owned content, and we're going to be starting a podcast. Again, we've got amazing thought leaders in the company, and we want to elevate their voices and again, take care of the unique advantage that we have, not just in terms of our product and the category that we're in and are helping to shape, but the experts that we have who can really, again, add value before the real value, which is taking our product for a test drive and then hopefully becoming an official customer. So the next slide is our podcast concept, and we're going to have a couple of the key members from that New Jersey task force as a guest to talk about, the efficacy of our partnership, why delivering accurate official answers is so mission critical, certainly for a government agency dealing with a pandemic, but really for any business that's really trying to cut out the noise and really own the narrative, right, which can really get away from you on search engines because of how much they've changed over time. So that's really our integrated marketing play. We want to continue to add legs to this and get as much use out of it as possible because it was a unique moment, and you want to exploit those moments, and content is a great way to amplify. And if you've got the right spin, if you've got the right hook, then you can use it across all of your channels. And so of course, we'll take some of this content and use paid dollars to promote it even further, just to get people's attention, because it's a pretty cool thing that we were able to do. We're proud of it, and we want more people to know about it. And then the last piece of what we did with COVID, and I mentioned it up front, was again, what are the great assets that we have available to us, and how can we be helpful to a broader audience to, again, raise our brand awareness, but also really play into the narrative of what our products and services help do. So if you go to the next slide, we created a really great data story. So this is not this is a screenshot. We have not lost track of the flow of the presentation here. We created a blog post to talk about all of the data that we were sitting on. It was really a story around the consumer trends in search across industries as it relates to COVID. And you could see, for instance, luxury brands absolutely plummeting, while healthcare brands and pizza chains, for instance, were having more traffic than they've ever seen before. So we created an available presentation that people could download to get more context and to look at actual data sets. And then we actually, if you go to the next slide, created an interactive data hub. And we pitched this out to the press to say, hey, look, things are changing in real time with COVID-19. We've got amazing data that we're monitoring and that we're sitting on. And so if you want to be able to look at this on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to see just how consumer trends are shifting, we've got the pulse on this, and we can really be your sort of first responder when it comes to the effects of consumer behavior and consumer purchase behavior as the pandemic sort of ebbs and flows. And so that was another thing that we realized was unique to us, gave us a unique advantage. And again, as we pitched it to the press to try to get some earned media, the door wasn't it wasn't slammed hard in our face. We unfortunately went out when there was a lot of other noise going on, but the response was really great. It was, hey, this is awesome. I do want to keep a tab open on this, and let's circle back and check in when we start to see anything really interesting happening. And so it just opened that door to be able to check back in with some journalists who are, sort of actively covering the story as it relates to the economy overall. So just a couple of examples to show how none of us saw the pandemic coming, but we really looked at opportunities that were interesting and opportunistic and decided to seize them and really create a lot of content around that, so that our storytelling is adding a lot of value as people are considering us before they really get to the real value, which is, of course, adopting and implementing our products and our services. So that's a little bit about Yext and how we've managed to try to keep our own business continuity, all the while helping other businesses stay afloat as much as possible, since digital is really the only way of life right now.
Thanks, Josh. That's a fantastic story. Having heard it a couple of times, the mental image that comes to me of you is you standing in your kitchen juicing a lemon to make lemonade. The amount of content you have wrung out of this COVID opportunity that was created for you is incredible. And I'm just going to recap it for the audience. The situation happened. You created some owned content, which led to some earned content, which led to a case study, which, by the way, can have incredible legs, particularly if Harvard publishes it. You find that all over the web, which led to a podcast, which led to a report, which led to a website, and even better, was a website particularly for journalists to get information about it. And so, that in my mind is an incredibly good example of bringing out every bit of juice out of an opportunity. And just would also like to remind the audience, there's this tendency to want to go from story to story to story, but if you have one that's working, stick with it, you know, make the most out of it, just like Michelle did, just like Josh did. And with that, I'll take it to Andy and give her the floor. So Andy, you're up, and you're on mute currently, so hopefully you'll pop off and we'll hear you here.
Great, thank you, Dan. It's great to be here. So I run a small boutique marketing and branding agency called Cunningham Collective here in Silicon Valley, and I started my career as well in public relations. And I have to tell you that when the internet happened, because I'm old enough to remember everything that happened before the internet and PR and what happened after, it opened up this whole new world to me. So Dan, why don't you put the next slide on? And this whole new world was really about how you could actually be master of your destiny. Back in the day, in the early part of my career, when I was here in Silicon Valley, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on the launch of the Macintosh. We had only one channel of communication outside of advertising, and that was the press. And that was awesome, but we didn't have much control over it. So we had to do a lot of influencing and a lot of schmoozing, if you will. But once this internet thing happened and we were able to open up all these different channels, we got to a point where we could actually be masters of our own destiny. And I'm an English major from Northwestern University, and I take all of my inspiration from literature. So if you go to the next slide, you can see where my inspiration for that little line came from. It's an old poem written by a guy named William Ernest Henley. It's called Invictus. You may even know this poem. This man was facing I believe a second leg amputation. He had one leg amputated, and I believe he was facing a second one. It never happened. But when he was facing that, he wrote this poem about how he could have control over his own mind. And the last two lines are really the important ones. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And that is really where my inspiration comes from with all of this content marketing. I love content marketing and owned media because we now finally have control. Okay, Dan, next slide. So what I want to do is go through a case study that I was lucky enough to do for BlackBerry. I hope most people remember BlackBerry. BlackBerry at the time was a dying smartphone company, and they were basically facing annihilation at the hands of Android and Apple, and they basically lost the war. They lost the smartphone war because they chose purposefully not to go the app route because they felt it was not secure. And as if you all remember BlackBerry, they were all about mobility and security. That was the top thing. So once you open up your platform to apps, you no longer have security anymore. So Dan, why don't you go to the next slide? Let me explain the challenge that we had. Really, it was how do you transform a smartphone pioneer that was dying from a hardware manufacturer to a leading enterprise software company and make it relevant to a new audience. So we were able to get a lot of press on this, and I'll tell you about it in a little bit. But one of the interesting challenges that we had is we had a social media following of 43 million people led by Kim Kardashian, who we paid to play that role. And I know in most situations, companies want to get 43 million social media followers. Well, guess what? We ended up wanting to get rid of 43 million social media followers because they were following something that we were no longer going to be. So that was our challenge. So let's go to the next slide. So the perception of BlackBerry was molded by a number of things. And I would say that about half of it was BlackBerry's own fault. So first of all, there were declining hardware sales because Apple and Android were winning the game. Secondly, BlackBerry was relying a lot on its business as usual communication strategy. And the way that I actually won this business was I did a study of all of the channels that were out there that they had control over, and I measured how much of that content that they were putting out under their own control, how much of that content was about hardware. And what we discovered is that 48% of their tweets were about hardware, 33% of their LinkedIn posts were about hardware, and 70% of their company blogs were all about hardware. And yet they were trying to make this shift to being a software company. And even John Chen, who I adore, and I think he's one of the best CEOs out there, he even said early on, I know you guys love your BlackBerry devices, and we're going to do everything in our power to continue to rebuild that business. When in fact, under the covers, he was trying to get rid of the hardware business and turn the company into a software company. So this was a big challenge. I mean, it's one thing to have the outside world hurt your chances of success. It's another thing to start sticking arrows into your own heart, which is what BlackBerry was doing here. Next slide, please. So the aha that we had an aha in all of this, and that was to really around a new narrative. But this aha came to us around the idea of creating a white space in the already noisy Internet of Things space. And that was a huge thing at the time. So we wanted to create a story that would really describe BlackBerry's journey from the smartphone leader and failure to a software leader. So we came up with this line that was really this. It was BlackBerry is no longer about the smartphone, but the smart in the phone and in cars and containers, medical devices and wearables, consumer appliances and industrial machinery, and ultimately the entire enterprise. BlackBerry software provides the embedded intelligence to secure what we call the enterprise of things so that the Internet of Things can thrive. And I want to explain what the enterprise of things was, because this idea caught on really well, especially with the analyst community. When you're looking at an Internet of Things, you're looking at devices like thermostats and toasters and refrigerators and cars and things like that, and they're final devices. But if you look at that final device, it's filled with components that have all touched the Internet in the supply chain on its way to becoming a toaster. And when you realize that, that's how you can hack into people's lives, through a toaster or a car or an entertainment system, because all those little components are connected to the Internet. So somebody had to do the job of securing that enterprise of things, the supply chain, so that the Internet of Things can thrive and be healthy. And we ended up doing a lot of work, not only with John Chen, the CEO, but also Marty Beard, the COO, who really looked at the work we did and said, we really kind of helped them with the strategy to distill what they were doing down to a vision. And it became a rallying cry for the company. Okay, Dan, you want to go to the next slide? So we performed this turnaround with BlackBerry really with owned media, 100%. And within 3 months, we were able to make a difference. But it's all started with this thing we call a message architecture. And every key message, every portion of that story lives on this page that we call a key message architecture. And the idea behind this, which this took a couple 3 months to create and do all the research to get to, but once we finally got there, we were able to embed the messages in this architecture in every form of content that BlackBerry was doing at the time. So we took all those numbers I showed you in the earlier slide, where so much of their tweets were about hardware, so much of their LinkedIn was about hardware, even their blogs were about hardware, and we shifted that narrative to the narrative that we had created all around software. And within 3 months, the whole world had changed. So you want to go to the next slide? What we were able to do was go from a boilerplate in 2016, which was all about innovative solutions across the entire mobile ecosystem, to this new idea that BlackBerry is dedicated to securing the enterprise of things. So we looked at the assets that BlackBerry had, which was mobility and security, and we pulled them out of the old world and we plopped them into the new world and created this thing called Enterprise of Things. And on Enterprise of Things, we created just a ton of content to tell that story. Next slide. So we were actually quite shocked at the results of all of this. Right after we did this, and as I mentioned, it took about 3 months to take hold in the market, but the stock price just started heading up on a giant trajectory and continued on for several months after this product launched, which goes to show you how much you can do with your own content. If you go to the next slide, you'll see what happened after that. Because once we sent our own messages out there and built our own digital footprint that was giant and all about the enterprise of things, we then started coverage coming from that. So we no longer had to pitch the press on BlackBerry. We were pointing the press to BlackBerry because that digital footprint was so well established. And so we got a whole bunch of TechCrunch and CNN television stuff, and everybody was talking about the turnaround, and everyone was talking about BlackBerry making a comeback. So it just goes to show you that you do have control over your own destiny, and you do it through owned media. So that's my story.
And that's a fantastic story. And I like it a lot because it's great in contrast to Josh and Michelle's stories. Josh and Michelle were immediate things that happened in the moment. COVID comes up, changes the world. You've got to react to it. Yours was a very structured approach of not only rebanding, but really completely fundamentally changing the corporate messaging. And I love the payoff here. Not only did you generate this earned media from a owned media effort, which is sort of, kind of the holy grail. This slide is the incredible one too. It actually changed the whole value of the company by getting the messaging right. So, to me, it's just a strong testament to the value of the work that we all do in communications and trying to get that message right and get it out there. So it's a good contrast between all three of the case studies. And I thank all of our panelists for sharing some best practices and a little bit of their personal highlight reels. So with that, we're going to move to the discussion and Q&A phase. I have a couple of questions to kick things off, and then please do go ahead and submit your questions in the chat section, and I will do my best to get to as many of them as I can. We have a pretty large audience, so I will do my best to look in 2 or 3 places at one time. But I'll start the panel discussion going back to the 5 owned media strategies that we discussed in the beginning. The first one was provide something of value. And I thought I would ask Josh to maybe elaborate on that concept a little bit from his point of view, or provide an example. I know you did that in your case study, Josh, but I'll let you enrich here for a minute or so.
Yeah, sorry, my sound just cut out for 1 second. So tell me the thing you want me to.
Was talking about providing something of value as an own media strategy. Yep.
Totally, yeah. And there was a question that came up in the panel or in the chat that I just responded to. So value before the value, again, we're all in the business of selling products and services, and that's where the real value is, and certainly the real value for your company, because people are buying what you're creating, hopefully. But the customer journey is obviously a complex one, right? And so if people are less aware of who you are, less aware of the problem that you're solving, maybe less aware of sort of what's happening in your industry, then that's a real opportunity for you to think about using content as a way to kind of warm them up, but give them something of real value. So at Yext, we have a series that's called Answer Me This. And so we really tried to integrate our product message around kind of questions and answers into that softly. It's really about how can we tap into a network of influencers and create really great conversations that people can be a part of to get to know us, right? So there's a little bit of education, a little bit of entertainment value that we're providing through that first touch experience. We're now working on sort of a next step, which we're calling, our working title is a masterclass. And that's a gated opportunity that we'll create where you could have a series of 5 short, very well-produced classes that will be framed around like how to sound smarter in front of your CMO, or how to sound smarter in front of whomever, right? So giving you value to sound a little bit more up to speed on what's going on, in our case, within search and how the search industry has changed so dramatically. Then the next value is us following up and saying, hey, we've actually run your brand, your business through this challenge that we have, and we've got some real specific information about how your website is performing, and we'd love to sort of talk to you about like what that means, right? Another step of value. Then the next step of value is, of course, a free trial or a free kind of offering that gets them into the driver's seat. And then finally, once they become a long-term customer, then they should be able to see consistent value, and then you use content on that side of the funnel to continue to educate them and again, make them feel that they are sort of empowered and that their decision to go with you is justified. So there's definitely a lot of room to provide value before the value, and then of course using content to continue to nurture your customers and enable that retention. So that's just an example of some of the ways in which we're using content, some live content and some sort of on-demand content in an effort to really exploit where we're differentiated, tap into the unique people that we have, and share that with people so that they can become a little bit more proficient in what we're trying to get them to do.
Sure. After this, I'll remember the provide the value before the value. That's one of my key takeaways, Josh. So thanks for that. Another one of the 5 owned media strategies that we hit up front was optimizing for discovery. And Andy, I think you might have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you know, everything should be written in such a way that it can be searched, whether it's done with paid search or whether it's done organically. And I'm a big believer in these things I call memes, which I think are especially critical right now. And they're little tiny words or phrases that when spoken or read, they completely are they are, sorry, somebody's waving at me from outside. These memes are completely packaged with the entire narrative of the whole story. And the best example to give, even though it's probably not one of my most favorite ones, but when you hear one of Donald Trump's memes, and he has many of them all the time, like Make America Great Again or Crooked Hillary or any of these, the entire Donald Trump narrative just bursts forth in your mind because you hear those words. If you're an older person like I am, you might remember the IBM meme of Think. Whenever I hear the word think now, the whole IBM story just bursts forth. So the idea is to create a few of these memes so that you can be discovered. You can be sticky and discovered.
Yep, perfect. The power of memes. Michelle, our third owned media strategy was enlisting internal experts. And I thought maybe you could offer some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So I've done this in a number of different programs at different companies, and what I found is it depends on the type of company and the type of program you're running. With technical audiences or technical spokespeople, so to speak, or technical writers, I guess, typically that's often a challenge with a content program. Like, where am I going to find these technical experts? And particularly if you have internal folks who are quite busy. What I find is I typically look at, okay, what are my program needs, and identify the experts who I want to tap. Are they executives? Are they people who are just, tied up as engineers working on an implementation? And I look at what's going to motivate them the most. In large part, I start with a sourcing model. So if I can get them to agree to be part of a program, even if it just means I have my own group of writers who source from them, and the first step is getting them to agree to put their name on a piece of content that we source and write, then they start to kind of see their name in lights, so to speak. They get excited about it. Then the engagement between that individual, the subject matter expert, and the writing team gets deeper and deeper. And what I find is very quickly, they start to want to engage more and more, and eventually they're starting to write. Now, it depends on what their quality of writing is, of course, but that's one model. The second model is an incentive model. You can run programs where there is a reward or awards. The third model is one that plays to, I think, a little bit of ego and a little bit of celebration within a company, posting in Slack channels, celebrating when you have company events. People like that sort of internal recognition, particularly if they're contributing. If you have employee advocacy programs, it's the same concept. So I find that those kind of 3 different models work.
No, that's perfect and very well structured. I like the concept of manufacturing your subject matter experts, kind of making them, growing them into subject matter experts and contributors, and recognition is always pays dividends in that regard. In terms of amplifying your message, Josh, maybe I'll throw that to you for thoughts on, you have a good piece of content, do you guys do anything to amplify it in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we make informed decisions on, what content do we want to boost and put some paid behind. So for instance, we started doing a beta with a program in a world in which we can't do any live and in-person events. And often in the B2B space, you are at different trade shows, you're doing a lot of things in person. We have to pivot to an online existence. And so we wanted to take some of the best of moments from our big annual conference called Onward, which is akin to like a Dreamforce, a wee bit smaller, but about 3,000 people nonetheless. And there's always amazing on-stage discussions. We had Magic Johnson, we had Seth Meyers. I mean, we've had some really amazing kind of cultural icons who are able to talk about some relevant topics that both enlighten and engage our overall audience base. So we wanted to bring that model, and we created, as I mentioned in the last question, this Answer Me This series. We did it relatively small in the beginning in terms of just sort of sending out some emails to some prospects. As we did some learnings, we just did one yesterday with Angela Duckworth. It was an amazing conversation, and we put some paid promotion behind that. And so we cast a wider net, got a larger audience, and we're working now to think about how can we take a moment in time, a piece of live content, and have some follow-on pieces that we can use to our advantage. And so we think through the lens of owned, earned, and paid through everything that we do. I think that the New Jersey example was one that sort of touched on all of them. So amplification is mission critical. If you build it, they will come, just does not exist. So if you write a blog and you post it and you call it a day and say, I've just done my content strategy, you're not going to get far very fast. So again, it comes down to, I believe, finding that unfair advantage, finding those unique things, what both Michelle and Andy just talked about, some of those memes that you can then continue to use to your advantage so that amplification becomes even easier over time.
Great, Josh. I'd also add that for amplification, Inclusive does have a capability to help clients amplify their content. So if you have a piece of content that you don't feel is being discovered enough or shared enough, go to our website and look up brand impact. You'll see a little bit there. And then, the fifth earned media strategy was about measuring and optimizing. Of course, as a measurement and optimization company, we think we have some tools that are very helpful in that regard. But more than anything, we just want to make sure that all of you are working so hard on your own media, come up with the measurement program that works for you, so that you can get the credit and also have a guiding light. I'm going to click over to a bunch of questions that have come in, and so I'll put these out for the panel, and we'll go for some short, snappy answers here. So Mark asked, how do you define owned media in a B2B context? I'll just go for the first one who wants to respond there.
Sure. I mean, go. No, Andy, you go.
Sure. I'll just quickly. I mean, in the B2B context, you actually have even more, because almost everything that's out there is your channels. You've got sales pitches. You can't forget anything that happens in other departments is still part of owned media. So sales pitches and speeches that people deliver, things that other people write and publish in other places. You need to create a situation where you have influence over every single bit of content that comes out of the company. And don't forget about HR. Tons of great content comes out of HR in order to recruit people and also to keep them. That should all be influenced by the content marketing strategy.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll just add on one other piece of important, I would say owned, but it becomes earned if you actually are good client partners, are your customer stories, right? So if you have great success with your customer base and you can use those as real living, breathing examples and get some muscle out of that, it's an owned opportunity that you can distribute on your own channels, but it's also earned if you can get those clients to also endorse you along the way. So how all of these different channels intersect with one another, I think, is the important thing to think about. But to Andy's point, you got a lot of owned available. You just got to make sure that you are igniting it in the right way.
Absolutely. We have a question here from Jessica, which is, how do you see video content playing into owned media strategies? I'll put that out to, I'll give Michelle an opportunity if she wants to take this one. Otherwise, anybody can take it.
Sure. I think I might have answered that in the chat as well. So, I mean, video is obviously a fantastic opportunity. It humanizes the content. It dramatically improves performance. We've just started actually taking our webinar program, creating video snippets or video shorts, so to speak, leveraging that in various channels. We're going to be infusing it in blogs. I think the sky's the limit with video for multi-channel, and I highly encourage it. I've used it in the past, and I think, frankly, we're behind the times in our own content program with video. The challenge with video for me is I've often worked in kind of starter brands, and we haven't had budget, but there are just so many creative ways, and I don't think you need polished video today. And I think for perfectionist marketers, that's often a barrier that we have to just get over, because authentic video is perfectly fine.
Yep, perfect. I agree. Video, we're at Onclusive experimenting with it more and more these days ourselves. Here's a question. Let me just make sure I get the right one. Oh, yes. How would these strategies translate into the nonprofit sector? I don't know if any of you have any thoughts and care to offer your opinions, if there's any particular nuance, or if I personally would offer that the fundamentals are probably pretty much the same, but
yeah, Dan, I actually have, I founded a nonprofit organization in 2000. So I've been hard at this game with a nonprofit for over 20 years. And it is exactly the same. But the trick is you have to think of marketing as development in a nonprofit. So it's more, so you're really in a business, marketing is there to help you create an environment in order to sell products. In a nonprofit, you're there to try to create an environment to raise money.
Yeah. All right, good. Chris, I knew we would have the answer in the panel there somewhere. Thanks. Asaki has a question about, he makes a statement, or he or she makes a statement. I think industry values earned media over owned media. How do you create the trust in your owned media? Because that's the kind of the key element. It's that why should people trust the story that you're telling about yourself?
Well, I'll answer that, and I think it goes back to the value before the value. I mean, we've got great thought leaders, right, who have great takes and insights, and you look at their pedigree and what they've done in their career, right? So if you have available to you inside or outside the company people with whom you can partner to give advice, to give perspective, to give storytelling through those own channels, then you just start to build that trust over time, and again, that helps you differentiate and stand out a bit. And then the earned will come from that, right? If suddenly you are creating content that is a really distinct or unique, maybe provocative take on something, well, people want to hear that, right? Because it's new news. And so I think to me, it all comes down to looking at what you have available to you and how you can put a really unique perspective or spin on something as a way to get people's attention, and then make sure that all of that is verified in the right ways. So I think that's really, I think people underestimate how much they probably have available to them that they're not exploiting. And I would even say that in a non-for-profit context, it's all about development and raising money, but sometimes people have boards of 30 people that can be an amazing amplification and content engine in their own right? So really think about who you have, what they know, and how you can use that to create a unique advantage that will then in turn build trust.
Cool. And I think we're at time. I'm going to ask one last question because I think Andy has a good response for it, which is, how much of your owned media is original content versus sourced content? We talk about producing all of this own content as if like, hey, it's just there for the picking and stuff. But are there strategies to go get own content from outside? So Andy, the question was, how much of your own media is original content versus sourced, or do you have thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I think as long as someone is a managing editor of that content, you need to curate the content that you're using, and you need to manage it. It's fine. And so I'd say whatever you can do, if you can afford to hire outside people to do it, that's great. If you curate it from already existing content, I think that's okay too. That's kind of how the Huffington Post started. It was just an aggregator of curated content. So it can be quite powerful if you get the right stuff, but you have to have a really great, quote, managing editor to help you with that.
I agree. And I think during our prep for this, one of you discussed creating a content advisory board, which I thought was a great idea for.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think I mentioned that yesterday. One of the things we are doing with a client now is exactly that, is finding content that's already written by other people. It's a scientific situation, and we are hiring and not hiring. We're asking an editorial board to come on of really credible scientists who will act as curators of that content. So together, that group of curated scientists will act as kind of the managing editor, and they will decide which pieces we put on the website and which pieces we don't.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy. And with that, we will conclude. There is one more thing to stick around for, though, for those of you hanging on. First, I'd just like to thank Andy, Josh, and Michelle. I think the case studies were fantastic, and it's just a unique and special opportunity to be able to have this discussion on an important topic in communications. And then I do want to offer those couple of hundred of you who have given us the extra 2 minutes of your time an opportunity to try our new media monitoring service for free. Go to www.onclusive.com/trial. We have some new capabilities that we were rolling out, and we'd encourage you to give them a try. So taking a page out of Josh's playbook and offering something there for free before the value, hopefully. All right. Well, Andy, thanks. Josh, thank you very much. And Michelle, we really appreciate you kicking things off.
Thank you, guys. It was fun.
Great. All right. With that, we'll sign off.
Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.